My name is Michael, but I'm better known by my gamer tag, Japanese Import. I've been here at Skillcaps for about 4 years now making guides, but what most people don't know is that I've actually been coaching the game for about twice that, and playing the game for even longer. You may assume that because I'm Challenger, I can't relate to a lot of low elo problems, but I assure you I can. Not only have I coached every rank, role, and kind of player from complete noob to professional, I've also had to painstakingly climb the ladder myself. I was stuck in silver with a negative win rate for over 2,000 games my first rank season, and actually I had my diamond friend duo and carry me to gold for ranked rewards. Of course, I would eventually be able to hit gold on my own and continue to go much further than that, but all I'm getting at is that it didn't exactly just click for me either. Not everyone that hits high ranks was just magically good day one. I had to play a lot, study, reflect on my games, and actually work to get to the skill level that I'm at today. Between that experience and 5,000 plus hours I have coaching, I feel like I have a pretty good sense of what needs players of certain elos have in order to hit the next rank. There may be a million different concepts in League that you should learn, but let's be honest, not all of those ideas are as universal as the others. For specific roles and specific ranks, there are usually a couple of really important ideas that will bring you to the next level. You could waste a ton of time learning hundreds of concepts, or you could focus your time on the one that's going to give you the biggest payout. And that's what today's guide is for. We're going to be going over the main ideas that will help you climb the most consistently as a jungler and actually get you out of your elo and beyond. The first thing to get out of the way is to address that we have in fact made a video on this before. But jungle has drastically changed since then, and so have all of the points I'm going to bring up today as a result. For example, my first advice for junglers in Season 12 was to optimize their clear, mostly because the difference between a good and bad clear could be up to 50 seconds between bronze and challenger players, and still 10 to 20 seconds even just from bronze to platinum. Basically, it was a huge deal to save a lot of time. After all, if you're just 50 seconds ahead of the other player in a game, or ahead if you were the one that practiced, you basically would instantly win. But in Season 13, that's just not true anymore. Scuttle Crab spawns were delayed, and Phalaris showed that even with literally no kiting on camps, that the difference between someone who fully optimized their clear and someone who just didn't wasn't that big anymore. Of course, we should still aim to be able to clear in a reasonable amount of time, but you don't need to pour in a lot of hours to get this down anymore. If you're only a few seconds behind challenger players, it's just not a huge deal. The gap just isn't that large anymore. So what do we actually recommend to spend your time focusing on? If I had to get someone out of bronze as fast as possible, I would tell them to pick a champ that scales well and then do nothing but AFK farm and show up to team fights after 20 minutes. This is something I think most challenger players would agree on as good advice, but it's definitely detrimental in the long run, even if it would immediately get you to a higher rank. So why do people even ever recommend it in the first place? It's because the biggest issue for this level of play is simply trying to do too much. It's not a bad thing to want to be able to gank and impact the map, but at this level, most players simply just don't have the foresight to be able to tell what ganks, objectives, and plays are good or not. If you're playing against someone who on average wastes their time looking for things and you just do nothing but clear, you will come out ahead simply because you're doing the baseline. Obviously, at higher levels of play, you can't do this, and that's why it's bad advice. You don't want to build a habit that will eventually be bad down the road. So instead of the shortcut that will pay off right now, what I recommend to work on are the things that will let you identify how and when plays are going to work, which, while more work now, will pay off tremendously later. For now, just exclusively focus on ganking. Objectives and coordinated plays don't really happen in this elo, so the number one priority should be getting an individual lead. The easiest way to do this is to read body language. Let me show you an example of how I abuse this in my games from one of our Smurf commentaries. I set a trap for the enemy jungler and catch him by surprise at his red buff. At this point, it should be apparent to everyone on the enemy team exactly where I am, and for that reason, you would think that no gank I want to go for will ever work here and I should just leave. That is completely true, but the second I look bottom, I can tell that my gank will in fact still work. If Misfortune is autoing the wave here, her intentions are fairly obvious. She's going to try and push. If that weren't the case, then she just wouldn't be autoing the minions. Because of this, I'm easily able to just walk in and make a gank work that has absolutely no business actually happening. Her actions directly showed me that she didn't understand that she needed to respect my gank. but if I hadn't looked bot and seen this, I never would have actually committed for it. These are exactly the kinds of plays that you will be able to find in your games. It's not really important at this point that you understand why people are doing things. At this ELO, they may actually not have good reasoning, but you should still be able to read the intentions of your opponents. If you don't have a direct cue from their actions, you shouldn't go for the gank at all. This brings me to another point. Unlock your camera. If you don't use unlocked camera and look at lanes, there is no hope at all of actually being able to tell what ganks are good or not. You simply won't have enough info and you'll end up wasting a ton of time. Just because you can gank something doesn't mean it will be good. The goal for now should be to start improving the success rate of plays through reading intent, and in the downtime, farm away. There's an extremely common phenomenon in lower elos where every jungler always starts with their bot lane for the better leash. Something like 95% of games are both junglers just heading towards topside, which is definitely incorrect. If you ask a high elo player how they feel about leashes, oftentimes they're completely fine just not getting one altogether. The changes to camps really made it so that leashes just aren't that big of a deal, since almost every champion in the game has a pretty quick clear now. With that being said, I think it's important at this point to start placing emphasis on making sure you're in a place on the map that actually gives you something to do. Both junglers starting bot side means that they will always end up pathing towards top side, and this is a huge issue just due to the fact of how jungle functions. You need to be able to access camps to gain resources, as without them, you will become completely irrelevant in the game. Always heading towards top ignores that fact completely. Generally, one jungler wins the 1v1 matchup. For example, Kindred versus Sejuani is not exactly a Sejuani favorite. In a fight, the Kindred should always win if they started on even footing. In the same vein, lanes often swing pretty hard in one player's favor. And if you have a lane that is much stronger early, any fights with them is a surefire way to make your life much easier. In the case that you have a losing lane in a losing jungle matchup, you can really screw yourself over. I mean, even in that earlier Graves example, this was the exact problem that started Echo's struggle of a game. He ended up pathing topside into a Malphite lane who is really useless pre-6, and knowing this, it allowed me to do 3 camps and invade with red buff to go mess with him and force him off of his camps. Of course, the numbers are even at 3 versus 3 here, but our champs are just way better at this stage of the game. Echo could have avoided this entire headache by just starting topside and pathing down towards his winning bot lane. His MF and Nami actually had prio throughout the entire early game here, which would have protected him from an invade. You may not get it right every time, and that's totally fine. After all, we're focused on learning right now. But definitely start thinking about your starting location and try to path into matchups that you think are winning for your team. With more experience, you will get better at identifying factors that help, but good things to look for are range versus melee matchups where you have the range champion, or maybe ignite versus a non-combat spell like teleport, and champions with better early wave clear than your opponent, since you'll get push and then prio. If you win your 1v1, try to path into your opponent, and if you lose, try to path away, which in this case usually is going to mean pathing towards bot side until higher up when other players start varying their clears a bit more. This basically just limits the amount of times that you can get absolutely demolished in the first few minutes and or have absolutely nothing to do, which if you can survive the early game and implement what we talked about in the first section of this guide, you should be well on your way to gold. And there's actually one course on our website, skillcap.com, that we highly recommend you take if you're struggling with these issues. It's our course that teaches you the current best meta jungle routes in the game. This way, while you wait for your next game to start, you can learn the fast level 3, same side level 3, the 4 camp, the list goes on. It even includes a cheat sheet that gives the jungle path we recommend for every single jungle champion. It's a must watch if you want to start mastering the early game as a jungler. We have courses on every single jungle skill you need to master in order to rank up, taught by the best players. Skillcap is the perfect platform to help take your game to the next level. That's not all we offer though, as every week we release 10 brand new Smurf commentaries where a challenger player teaches you how to climb out of the exact rank you're stuck in. If you're looking for something more personal instead, then we've got you covered with one-on-one coaching from our trained challenger experts. All of this seemed too good to be true? Well, don't worry. We're backed by a rank up guarantee. If you don't significantly improve while actively using Skillcap, then you get your money back, no questions asked. So, what are you waiting for? Get the rank you've always wanted by clicking the link in the description below. All right, now let's jump into gold. Mechanics really aren't that important in the grand scheme of things for junglers. Compared to just being in the right place at the right time, it's rather poor payoff. But that doesn't mean we can completely ignore how to play fights. You're going to need to start applying two concepts very consistently in your games: holding abilities to account for enemy options, and adjusting gank paths to account for options as well. Basically, we're just going to start concerning ourselves with what our opponents can do. For example, in this clip, I could easily throw R to hit TF and potentially kill him quickly, but I know that he still has flash, and for that reason, I'm not going to use it until his flash is gone. It's very simple in theory, but the idea is that you always want to be able to have counterplay for whatever your opponent can do. You'll want to do everything you can to make it so that you aren't wasting options unnecessarily and blowing your chances of getting kills. Holding Cocoon here, for example, and getting into range using my guaranteed gap closers first help make this work. And the other thing, well, actually consciously thinking of the gank path and angle I'm taking when ganking, and adjusting it helps as well. Notice that I'm not actually clicking Yumi here, I'm clicking next to her. As the gank plays out, I'm continuously clicking to get the optimal path to cut off her escape route until I'm exactly in range to repel. In this ELO, I see a lot of players just right-click their target to get into range, and this just completely ruins ganks like you would not believe. It's not just during the actual gank itself that you should think about this though, as one of the core principles of jungle is staying hidden on map to provide pressure. If the enemy has no idea where you are, they have to play around the fact that you could be anywhere. Tons of low elo players will not take paths that avoid commonly warded areas, or even just straight up show on ganks that just aren't going to work. If you aren't constantly thinking about how to avoid vision, it's time to start. One of the most common mistakes I see is during invades. For example, this is a very common route for red side to take while invading into blue side, but it's pretty terrible. If someone's in the bush, you're never going to catch them off guard. So the high elo way of doing this is to actually take this route. By hugging the wall, we can get the drop on someone that's in the bush and avoid showing unnecessarily. For a real game example, notice that the initial path hugs the blue wall, and then when I notice that blue is gone, I'm worried about him seeing me while doing his Gromp or Wolves. So once I check Wolves, I feel like it's likely he's on Gromp, and then fully walk to the left in order to hug the wall and get as close to it as I can without being spotted. In the case of actual ganks, I might have an idea to go into a lane, but once I realize that I'm not going to fully commit, I will do everything in my power to avoid showing on map, like here where I immediately run back into the jungle to avoid showing on minions. Or here where I walk over an initial ward but realize that the bush to the right could also be warded, and I can at least avoid showing again by staying in a location that is less likely to have a ward. It's really the little things, but they make all the difference. At this rank, you're going to have to constantly be thinking of your time management skills. It's no longer enough to just get one lead and ride it out until the end of the game. We need to know how to consistently push forward at all stages. Let's watch a student's replay really quickly to further elaborate on this. He manages to find a well-timed counter gank on mid lane, and this undoubtedly sets the enemy jungle in mid very far behind. Of course, we should be happy with this, but we do need to keep planning ahead. What you'll notice at this stage of the game is that death timers are extremely short. So short, in fact, that if Warwick and Xin Zhao were to recall immediately without doing anything right now, Yasuo would still beat them in a race back to mid lane. Not only do death timers often just barely exceed the amount of time it takes to recall, there's also death home guards that allow respawning champions to get back on the map extremely quickly. Because of this, we already need to feel pressured to respond to that potential threat. By the time we can push in mid lane, we are technically behind pacing on both of the players we just killed. And it's a good idea that once you get ahead of someone, you just try to continue to force interactions with them and push your lead. I would have skipped both topside camps here to immediately recall, and then try and figure out where Echo would be to prevent his play. But in this game, my student continues clearing his topside camps, and while that may feel rather harmless, we need to realize that this is a minute and 20 seconds of time that we just lost, or about a 1/6 of the total game time so far. Had we recalled right away, we would be bot in time to make it to this play to stop our bot lane from dying. But because we continued farming camps, Echo is actually able to beat us to bot and make a play before us. Small advantages in time can be huge. Like I mentioned earlier, learning how to clear well used to be extremely important due to this. Not that it's not important now, but even if you can get a 10-second advantage over someone from farming, if you just waste time by making a play like this, it doesn't really matter. It's more valuable to learn how to spot this kind of mistake. Learn to not get taken advantage of due to late resets, or not being places on time. And in doing so, you can also start to think about punishing your opponents for not doing the same. Even if you do die in some play, your first thought should be the fact that you actually gained tempo, and you should try to use that to your advantage. Losing one play doesn't make or break the game unless both players have fully mastered this idea, and it's about to start mattering a whole lot more the further up you go. Upon hitting Diamond, a lot of players will have the mentality that the players they're starting to play against are better, more competent, and that they demand a lot more respect. And it's kind of true, but you will also run into a massive mental wall if you play in accordance to this mentality. I personally struggled here for a while trying to figure out what to do to improve. When I first hit high elo, Masters wasn't even a thing yet. You would just hit Diamond 1 99 LP and you'd have to win a ton of games getting 0 LP per win until you would eventually qualify for a promotion series when you got through the clamp. It was extremely hard for me, someone who was brand new to high elo, to figure out what I was doing differently than the players that were apparently so much better than me, but only a rank away. Every time I would play against them, I would play incredibly respectfully. I still vividly remember playing against Santorin maybe 7 or 8 years ago in a game. I was blue side Gragas into his red side Olaf. I was expecting him to full clear just because that's what every Olaf did. And because of this, I just matched him, hoping to go even. And in this game, it's not at all what happened. Santorin actually did 3 camps and then just invaded me and killed me on my red. And this was a pretty brutal awakening. I realized I wasn't playing to win. I was just playing not to lose. I was so scared of these players that I completely lost sight of everything I had ever worked on to get to that point in the first place. I needed to just play my game and things were gonna go better. I started watching replays, studying Santorin, Spica, Yankos, and in all of these players' VODs, I noticed a huge difference. They were much more aggressive than me. They would go for dives I hadn't even considered before. Repeat ganks, skipping camps, just impacting the map in ways that felt super unnatural to me. The only way to beat people that did well enough to get to this point was to also do the things that they were doing and beat them at their own game. And after this realization, I hit Challenger the next year. What I'm really saying is that the window to make plays and impact the game is so narrow compared to what you're used to in lower elos. If you hesitate even a little bit, you can completely lose your opportunity. You might only have a few seconds to go for a play, and you need to be able to spot it. If you're too concerned with not losing the game, you'll never be able to find the plays in time that you need in order to, well, win. Of course, at this point, you will need to get better at every fundamental in the game to progress, especially to Challenger, but the mental aspect of this game at this point is one that's often overlooked and so important. Not only not psyching yourself out, but also remaining calm and holding a learning mentality. You'll have to study and incorporate things from other players. Watch other people, watch your own VODs, and compare your decision making to better players. There's no shame in looking externally for help, be it through guides, coaching, or VODs, and embracing the fact that this grind at this point was so slow and arduous will mentally prepare you for what's to come. Take breaks between games and just avoid tilting and rage queuing. You won't be able to maintain an amazing win rate at high elo. You will lose games you think you should have won very frequently, even if you do everything right. It's a marathon at this point, and separating the results of the game from your gameplay to view things more objectively is absolutely necessary to progress. Alright, that pretty much wraps things up. No matter where you are in your rank journey right now, just remember that everyone goes at their own pace. We all started the game at different times. We'll take longer or shorter to grasp certain concepts, and in general, we just shouldn't compare. As a great guitar teacher, Tomo Fujita once said, "Don't compare, don't worry, and don't expect too fast." I think we all just need a reminder sometimes. And of course, if you do want to fast track your improvement, there's nothing better than skillcap.com. With premium courses for every single jungle skill you need to master in order to rank up, taught by the best players, Skillcapped is the perfect platform to help take your game to the next level. Our service is completely risk-free to try, as you're kept safe with rank up insurance. If you don't significantly improve while actively using Skillcapped, then you get your money back, no questions asked. So what are you waiting for? Get the rank you've always wanted by clicking the link in the description below. Alright, that's a wrap on this one, guys. We here at Skillcapped want to thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.